Hello, everybody, and welcome to Change Itself. We're back. I'm your host, Gus Miner, and I'm joined with Eric Demers as usual. And again, if it's the first time joining us on our episode, we're happy to have you. And it's been a little while. We've had a little bit of a hiatus with our recordings because of all the conferences and all the movement that we've had within our segment of the business. How's things been?
They've been really good. It's been busy, like you said, conferences and traveling and trying to get the word out about the new raise board that we've got coming here at Technica. And yeah, I feel like I'm home now. I've been on the road for feels like 6 months at this point. So, happy to be home and definitely different that we're back doing this through the computer because I get the chance to do it live with Jared over at when we were in Vancouver. So and Mario Grassi. So it's a really different feel, different vibe. But happy to be back. Excited to be doing this again. Yourself?
It's very good, man. And I mean, and then for the audience, I mean, we went through periods of time where we were meeting regularly and having regular conversations and fairly keeping up to date on what's going on and a lot of planning. And because of our missions and visions that we've been, executing, which is a good segue into our topic today, which is, you know, putting things in action versus motion and how different those two things are. So this is actually our first formal meeting that we've had in a while. We're having it with the whole audience, so it's awesome.
I mean, we got to chat a little bit last night on the phone, just kind of getting ready for this episode. But I'm gonna say it feels like it's been months since we've actually sat down and chatted. So excited for it.
Absolutely. Yeah, so like we said, I
So
mean, one of the things, and maybe I'll let the viewers in a little bit on what's going on, but I mean, I enjoy audiobooks. I spend a lot of time taking in information this way, no different than podcasts like we're doing now. But I re-listened for I think the second, or at least the second or third time, a book called Atomic Habits. And putting things in perspective as far as how do we get to our goals? How do we achieve the missions that we set for ourselves? And what do we need to do to put deliberate things in play on a regular basis so that we get to our goals? And as you know, like I've got a big background in nutrition and sports and stuff like that. And although lately it probably doesn't look like it, there's different things we have to put in play for that. And it's no different with work. So I thought it'd be a great conversation for us today, because I know that for people listening, there's probably a good resonance around the fact that there's no shortage of meetings, right? There's no shortage of conversations. There's no shortage of talking about what we want to do, and those all categorize in a sense of like those are all things where there's motion. So people tend to feel good about it because things are in motion, things are happening, there's conversations, but it's very, very different than actually putting the action button on, right? So, what do you think about that, Eric? I mean, I'm sure it resonates with you as well.
yeah, it definitely does. And so if I heard you correctly, motion feels like you're doing something. Action is actually doing something. Um, and yeah, especially when it comes like to habit building or even like anything be in projects, like um, sometimes I'll write stuff down. Like I'm notorious for having a notebook and I'll write things down and then check them off when they're complete. So to me, but some of those things, to your point around motion, is like I'll plan to have, I don't know, meeting with so and so on this topic. That's not an action. Okay, I might have scheduled the meeting. That might be an action. It's like schedule this thing or go do this thing. Then that would be for me is getting an action. But sometimes it feels good, but it's like feels like I'm letting myself off the hook and I'm selling myself a lie that yeah, I'm doing something. Here it is. I wrote it. I said I'd do something about it. And it's like procrastination almost for me, anyways. That's kind of what it is.
Yeah, I mean, the really interesting part about that difference between motion and action, I mean, especially when it comes to change management and when it comes to rolling things out or sending out a new initiative, you tend to feel good because you've done your risk assessments, you've done your planning, you've done your meetings to make sure everybody's on the same page. And a lot of times it delays what could be because you're trying to like dot your I's, cross your T's, make sure that everything's all good. And there's room and there's space for all those things. And sometimes those meetings are action in a context where, hey, depending on what happens with this, we could impact somebody's life. Like we could create a significant safety event if we don't do those things. So it's not to say that there's no room or you shouldn't be doing these things, right? But where mostly it makes a difference is if you've got a long-term goal, or let's say you say by the end of year, I want to save $1 million in equipment damage support, or I want to save $1 million in waste reduction of what goes on in the workplace, or I want to increase the productivity and decrease the time requirement for my supervisors or so on. Like there's all kinds of different things we can throw out there as ideas. Well, you could be burning 3-4 months conceptualizing what those results can be based on solutions you want to put in. Um, or you can start testing stuff out, right? You can start testing stuff out in very, very small scale that'll get you to where you need to be, right? No different than practicing taking your workout clothes and putting it by the door at night so that in the morning it's super easy. You wake up, you grab your clothes, and then off you go. And now it's because you created that small action that eventually will become a habit, because now you're just going to do that out of habit. And that's the Kickstarter of the chain of events that goes into going to the gym, right? I think there's
Yeah.
a huge opportunity here to capitalize on that, specifically in the workplace, where we can put some things in play and say, you know what, we're going to, I mean, for example, just as an example of like adopting a new digital tool, while we're doing our planning, push it out to everybody and just get them to log in. I want them to log in and do a synchronization every day, right? It's 2 minutes. It'll take you 2 minutes to do it, but it'll become a habit that happens every single day after you've done it for 3-4 weeks. So then now when I say, hey, now that you're logged in and you're used to doing that, can you go click on this extra button and do this activity? Again, it's 2 minutes, right? So from that concept, it was really cool to, in a way that we dissect work, like large tasks that could take us like a month, 2 months, 3 months, a year to deliver. We dissect those into small tasks so that we know how to progressively get there. And I think often we overlook that breakdown for the smaller stuff, right? So maybe if, for example, working out is going to take you an hour today, well, implementing a 1 hour habit into your routine, pretty easy to just check away from it, because it's a pretty big change. Like you're carving out an hour now that you didn't have yesterday that now you have today. You could follow it a certain extent, but then it starts to kind of like fall off because it's, but if you start putting things in, it's a 5 minute change. So every day I've added this 2 to 5 minute change. Not a huge impact, but it's an incremental step into where I want to be. And then these steps kind of compound, right? So have you given some thought about that, Eric, about different things that you've experienced where, man, if we would have just tried this at a certain degree before we spent 3 months planning it out, it would have probably saved a lot of energy.
Yeah, for sure. I'm just trying to think of something that's coming to mind right now. But yeah, I do think that there are times where maybe too much time is spent thinking about how we're going to do the thing versus doing the thing. And then I can speak specifically to implementation of software. So when I was doing the implementation of Sofvie, we were at one of the local mines here, and we were going through. It was given to me as a project, and so one of the things I wanted to do is put together a training package. So I spent all kinds of time putting together training package and planning sessions and trying to get everybody in the room together. Finally, get everybody in the room together, and we're going through this training presentation, step by step, how to open the app, how to open the tablet, because at that point, tablets were completely foreign to most people. And like, it was like step by step like that. And then in the room, what I found happening more and more is there'd be, at first, it was probably one or two people. And then by the end of it was like more than half the people were already way ahead of where I was anyways. And they were showing the other people. And it was like, actually, do I really need all of this in-depth, step-by-step proceduralized training. Maybe for some people, but for most people, it was intuitive and they were running with it. So I burnt a whole lot of time and energy putting things and worrying about things that actually never came to be. So that's one example. Another example for me is risk assessment. So a while back, it was just really challenging myself and my thinking around risk and risk management. And I found myself often I was focused on the negative things, like what do I want not to happen, right? And so in order for these 50 things not to happen, I'm going to put in 10 controls each. There's 500 controls. So there's 500 things now that I got to go do for a certain 50 things not to happen, if you will. These threats just that will never happen. But I never stopped and thought about what are the actions I need to put in place to make sure that this is successful. Like if I looked at it from the opposite side of being unsuccessful, if I looked at what are the threats or the things in the way of me being successful and what do I need to do, I actually don't need to worry about the other stuff most of the time because it's taken care of and it's in towards my goal, right? It's heading towards my goal. And they're usually actionable things. It's like a very specific do this, like very specific, and I'll use like that SMART acronym, the specific, measurable, help me out on the other two, but or the other three. But that's what it is. If it's specific and measurable, I can see it, I can visualize it, I can get it done. So I think maybe that's what you're talking about action. I'm not burning gas on things that I, maybe not need or that it makes me feel really good, but doesn't help me get towards my goal.
Yeah, it's about those small incremental steps, right? So no different than having like a half-hour meeting or 1 hour meeting to discuss about what the next things are. You could put that same effort into a small incremental step that maybe at the same time, maybe it's in parallel. Maybe like while you're having these incremental meetings to get to the, as a means to an end kind of thing, as far as like understanding what that process looks like A to Z, you're actually executing process, part of the process of ABC. You're planning to Z, but you can start kind of executing small pieces at a time to just see maybe Z looks totally different now. Like maybe you're spending that time going end to end this is the straight line you thought it was going to be, and then the result is actually this line that goes into a whole other way. And I find that actually plays a pretty big game in a pretty big part in that line of deviation. Like we talked about that a lot of times, where this is the expected flow of chain of events, and this is the expected result of your project. And then we look at the line of deviation go up and down like this, right? And then we start measuring that to say like, oh, you know what? We could have gained, like, this is a measure of our success on our plan. But in reality, the plan was somewhat fictitious in a certain sense of we've visualized what we wanted to achieve. And that deviation's actually not a measurement of bad. It's actually a lesson learned along the way so that the next time you execute it, it'll be tighter and tighter and tighter. So through that execution of specific action items, you're actually tightening up that line of deviation because you're dealing with facts. You're dealing with information that's coming in real time based on how things actually occur, right?
So if I take us back to the start of the conversation, in the book Atomic Habits, what you're saying is that in order to build these habits, there's the distinction between motion and action. Are there specific maybe characteristics to an action that would be helpful for our viewers, that would help really distinguish the difference between motion and action, and maybe specifically around implementation like you're doing? Like, what are some examples? Because what I'm hearing is that, and even from my experience, as we're doing implementations of whether it's a process or a software or a new module, you're essentially building habits and you're helping people build habits, correct? So like, what are some of these, things that we need to be on the lookout for and to do to really make them impactful actions rather than feeling like we're doing something, but we're really not getting ahead.
The perfect example that I can probably put out there as an end result is that when we talk about learning from data, right? And this is a common theme right now. We all want to learn from data and make data driven decisions, right? But there's this thing that exists where it's with the assumption that you have that data, which is a pretty big assumption, right? So most organizations will go down the path of like pre-designing the layouts of their dashboards, pre-designing the layouts of their reporting, pre-designing the outcomes of what it looks like to manipulate that data. In the meantime, nothing has been done to actually collect that information, right? And I see that time and time again. Like, oh man, if we have, for example, for equipment, right? If we have all the information of how much the equipment is being used every single day, and we understand our maintenance patterns, and we can put those maintenance patterns in there, we can get a dashboard that's going to tell us exactly which equipment is due and which equipment needs stuff, and we're going to know exactly how to schedule things. It's a great vision, right? But do you
So
have the data of when the services are due? Do you have the data of how much that equipment is used every single day? Do you have that data of the meters that you have to collect from a data point in order to get that end result? So then after that's all thought out, then you got to peel the onion right back and say, okay, now we're going to get people to log in and do their pre-ops, for example. They'll do their pre-ops so that we understand every single day how many hours are being used on each piece of equipment. And it's like, oh, hold on, our maintenance records are not necessarily all that accurate to understand the intervals of each piece of equipment and where we're at with it. So now this dashboard that we're trying to create is like a year away,
so what
right?
I'm hearing is building the dashboard and like the thing that we want, it feels like we're moving towards that. We got some motion and
We
we
got
have all the
motion, we
pieces,
got
we have all
planning.
the pieces in place for it. And we're like, oh, wait, I don't have the data to feed it to help me make good decisions. So what you're saying is if we get in action from the start and we start collecting data, in this case could be pre-ops, and that's been our experience as well, something I've learned through trial and error. Great dashboard, but if I don't have the pre-op and people aren't filling out the pre-op and I'm not getting, hour meter readings, it's not very useful. And so if I could at least get that, then there might be patterns in the data that become visible to me. But then I'm in action. Like I'm in action collecting data. Like the whole point is you need to be in action collecting data and you need data to make the dashboard work. So
Exactly.
great motion, getting the dashboard up and running. But if you
Yeah.
don't have the data and you're not collecting the data or have helped build a habit of data collection, then you're
Yeah.
going to be hard pressed to go use that data to make decisions.
Yeah. And then, like, so if we dissect this even further, right? If the people in the workplace don't have the habit of having a phone or a tablet with them,
Yeah.
that's the first habit you got to get in line. So you're never going to be able to collect a good pre-op or the good data if they left their tablet or their phone at home, or they left it in the locker, or they left it, or it's not charged, right? So you might be looking at different actions like, okay, while we're planning this out, let's get people used to carrying a device around and then they're going to do one thing with it every day. They're going to sign into it and they can say hello on a Teams channel or something,
One of
right?
the
Like,
things that we do is for that and to build that habit is a timesheet. So we'll get people to put in, their timesheet, even if it's a site that we might not be doing pre-tasks at. The good intro is like, what is something people are going to do every day? So
every single day.
we've tied in the action of the tablet to getting paid. And most people want to get paid for the work that they do. So there's an incentive internally to bring your tablet to make sure you can record it and submit it. Right.
Exactly.
And it's a very simple one. And it's one very simple form. It's, very intuitive. And so you build that habit of bringing the app or bringing the tablet, opening the app, going in there, checking every day. And so just one simple little carrot, if you will, or incentive, you know, helps build this one habit. And then
Exactly.
it becomes the norm.
And that's one thing that I think is overlooked too many times, right? The expectation is this, but we don't realize all of the little micro steps that need to be taken in place and in consideration before that becomes a reality, right? So so I think what we're really trying to educate everybody on right now is that I can build no different than a diet. I can build my meal plan. I can build my schedule of when I'm going to go to the gym. I'm going to build all of the areas of like, this is when I do cardio. This is when I do weights. This is when I, whatever the heck it is. So I could spend all that time building it out, right? But if while I'm building that, I'm still eating chips and I'm still sitting on the couch while I'm doing this and I don't even have gym shoes yet, right? Man, the cut over from this to that is like significant, right? But if I said, okay, well, hey, the first thing I need shoes. So while I'm building my plan, I'm going to go to a store build and I'm going to buy shoes, right? And well, I need to break them in. So I'm going to go for a little 2 to 5 minute walk with those shoes every day while I'm building out my plan. And then, oh, well, hey, plan is ready. Well, now I'm just going to walk over to the gym, right? Or whatever the case. Like you got to start putting in those incremental steps so that you can get to your destination much quicker, right?
I I find that part it's interesting because that the part of intention, putting intention behind setting up those little habits to go do is for me would be the part where I struggle to do that at times, especially if I'm trying to build a consistent habit to do something consistently and over a period of time. I can conceptualize it, I can clearly see it, I can see the benefits of it, but getting myself over the line to actually get in action about it,
Yeah.
tends to be there's a blockage there. So I don't know if there's anything they talked about in your book
Yeah.
about that one. I might have to go read the book now.
Yeah, I mean that's an invitation for everybody to read the book because on what they did is that there's what he mentions in there is that when you're building those small incremental steps, and in order for them to be sticky, there's got to be a high reward and high cost of not doing it, right? So, for example, your timesheet thing was a perfect example, right? High reward, you got into the system, you did your job, you're going to be commended for doing it. You'll be recognized for doing it. Super high reward, you're going to get paid the hours that you put in. The cost, you don't do it, that timesheet doesn't come in, you don't get paid. Massive cost. So you've kind of built in that accountability system in that fashion, right? And sometimes the accountability system could be with your peer or it could be with somebody else around you, right? So for example, you said, hey, you know what, guys, like I'm going to do this every single day. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to call you while I'm doing it so that you know that I'm doing that action. And every time I don't call you to tell you that I'm doing it, you could assume that I'm not doing it. I want you to like, I don't know, I owe you $50, right? Now, whether I take that $50 and store it aside or whatever the case be, but because like you're gonna lose $50 if you don't call me because you went for a walk. Like that was your first step that you wanted to take is you want to go for a little 5 to 10 minute walk. And that's part of your account. And then part of that accountability system is while you're in that walk, you're gonna call me. So then that becomes the next thing. And if you don't, I'm just building a tab. And then you're gonna owe me, I don't know, $300 at the end. So there's a high cost of you not doing it, right?
Yeah.
So I think it's important to consider those things when we start putting things in action. It's like, okay, especially when we're asking people to change their routines, right? And then when it comes to the workplace, sometimes just going digital is enough of that because you could say this is something they did on paper every single day, but it became routine. How did it become routine? They picked up a pad, like what, like let's say like we use pre-ops as an example. They got in a habit that in the morning, at the beginning of shift, they grab their pre-op. They got in a habit that when they get to the workplace, they got their pre-op, they take it out, they start doing it. And then they put it on the dash. And they got in a habit of picking it up from the dash and then bring it in it. So let's say they did it perfectly. We're assuming they're doing it perfectly, right?
They get in the habit of it when the supervisor's in the workplace and asked to see it.
Exactly. So now you say all we're doing is replacing that with the phone. Well, now what if they already have the phone? Now they feel like there's a piece that they're used to doing that they're not doing anymore, right? Because they already have their phone. Then they get in their workplace and they don't see the pad, like the visual cue of seeing the pad on a piece of equipment was enough for them to trigger the motion of, or the action of filling out the pre-op. Well, now that's gone, right? So now they have to create a new trigger to say, hey, I got my phone over here. This is what I do my pre-op. So these are the little things that we often overlook. I'm like, well, what do you mean? Like, all you got to do is do it in here. It's not that big of a change, but it actually is a pretty significant change from a routine standpoint, right?
Yeah.
So, anyways, it was an interesting thing that I thought we'd be able to chat about because I think it might help people think about things a little bit differently. One, possibly on the over planning and under execution side of things, possibly, but also on the part of like small little actions that don't seem that they're significant. They stack up and they compound on themselves to deliver like significant results, right? And you might be able to really accelerate those results by having those small movements take place while you're still working on the master plan. Anything you want to add to that as a closing remark, or anything that we want to invite our audience to participate in, or a challenge to try something out based on that topic?
Ooh, that's a big one because that means I got to get in action and challenge myself here. No, I just think it was another great episode, Gus, and thank you very much. And yeah, the challenge could be to just look at what you're doing and where are you spinning your wheels instead of getting in action. I think that'd be a great challenge and a great thing that I'll take on and go do myself. So thank you guys for watching. Thanks for that great conversation, Gus.
Yeah, thanks a lot. And then, hey, maybe as a final thing, go ahead and take the action of ringing that bell and giving us a comment if you like the episode. And maybe you say, this is what I want to achieve. Can you help me out? Break it down in pieces. I'll be happy to take that on and to support you. And look forward to continuing the conversations on the next one.